The economy is growing. That's what the data says. Global output is still expanding. Markets are holding. Official reports describe the system as resilient. But here's the contradiction. Most people are not feeling it. Not a little, not temporarily, consistently. This is not because growth disappeared. It's because access to that growth is being filtered before it ever reaches you. Let's start with what's real. According to major international forecasts from institutions like the UN and the OECD, the global economy is still expected to grow around 2.7 to 3% in 2026. That is slower than pre-pandemic levels, but it is still positive. In other words, the system did not collapse. It absorbed shocks, it adjusted, and it kept moving. From a macro perspective, this is stability. From a headline perspective, this is success. But macro stability does not guarantee individual access. The official story, the one told in spreadsheets and economic forecasts, is one of cautious optimism. But now, step away from the reports and look at actual life. Look out the window at the world we all navigate every single day. We're told that inflation has come down from its peak in many countries. That part is true. The rate of increase has slowed. It's a key metric that central banks and governments point to as a sign of success, a signal that the worst is over. But prices did not come down with it. That crucial distinction is where the official narrative disconnects from our lived experience. A slower rate of inflation doesn't mean things are getting cheaper. It just means they're getting more expensive at a slightly less frantic pace. The high prices we've been forced to absorb are now the new baseline. Food is still expensive. The cost of a basic basket of groceries continues to strain household budgets, turning a simple necessity into a source of daily financial pressure. Rent is still high. For millions, the dream of homeownership is more distant than ever, while the cost of simply keeping a roof over their heads consumes an ever larger portion of their paycheck. Energy, transport, healthcare, they all take a larger share of income than they did just a few years ago. These aren't discretionary expenses. They are the fundamental costs of participating in society. This is not speculation. This isn't just a feeling or a collection of anecdotes. Multiple international reports have warned that the cost of living pressure remains elevated, especially for low and middle-income households. These institutions confirm that while headline inflation numbers improve, the cumulative impact of past price hikes continues to erode purchasing power. So while inflation slows, the damage remains. The economic landscape has been permanently altered. The gap between wages and the cost of a decent life has widened, and it isn't closing. People are not asking whether inflation peaked. They are asking, why does the same income buy less life? Growth exists, but not for everyone. On paper, the global economy continues to expand, creating new wealth and opportunities. But if we want to understand the full picture, we have to ask a more pointed question. Now look at where that growth actually goes. When we peel back the aggregate numbers and examine the distribution, global inequality data shows a clear and persistent pattern. It's a story told not in headlines, but in the quiet, unassailable data from decades of economic analysis. The top 10% of the world's population controls roughly 3/4 of all global wealth. This isn't just income, it's the ownership of assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, and businesses. It's the engine of future wealth generation, and it is overwhelmingly concentrated at the very top. So what about everyone else? The bottom half of the world's population, nearly 4 billion people, holds around 2%, not 22. A figure so small it barely registers on the chart. This staggering imbalance means that for every dollar of wealth created, only 2 cents accrue to the bottom half. This is not a temporary distortion or a statistical anomaly from a single bad year. It is a long-term trend, a structural feature of our modern economy, documented across multiple independent reports, including global inequality studies and OECD distribution data. Over time, a disproportionate share of income growth has flowed to capital holders, large asset owners, and high-skill sectors. While wage growth for the majority has stagnated, the returns on capital have consistently outpaced the rate of economic growth itself. So yes, the economy grows, the stock market hits new highs, GDP figures look healthy, but that growth is not distributed. It is concentrated, flowing through predefined channels to the same destinations. From a distance, the system looks stronger, more efficient, but up close, for the vast majority, economic mobility slows down. The escalator of progress is still moving, but most people are stuck in place. Here is where the real shift happens. The economic landscape we've been navigating isn't just uneven, it's been systematically engineered with choke points that regulate the flow of opportunity. To understand why progress feels stalled for so many, we need to look past the surface-level data and examine the machinery operating underneath. It's a mechanism that doesn't just create gaps in wealth, but actively manages who gets a chance to build it in the first place. The core issue is not just inequality, which is often a symptom. The issue is access. Access to the fundamental tools that enable economic mobility and security. And this restriction of access is not random, nor is it a temporary market failure. It is a deliberate, structural filtering process. Opportunity is being filtered through three critical channels, each one compounding the effect of the others. First, the income filter. In many economies, wages are not keeping up with the true cost of living. Even when nominal wages rise, giving the illusion of progress, real purchasing power often stagnates or declines once inflation is factored in. This means your salary might look bigger on paper, but it buys you less food, less fuel, and less security than it did before. That means effort increases, but progression does not. You're running faster just to stay in the same place, a phenomenon that drains both financial resources and morale, making it nearly impossible to save or invest for the future. Second, the credit filter. Credit, the lifeblood of investment and a crucial safety net, still exists. The global pool of capital is larger than ever, but access to that credit is increasingly restricted for individuals and small enterprises. Higher interest rates, stringent collateral requirements, and automated risk scoring systems create formidable barriers. These systems, designed for efficiency, often penalize those without a long traditional credit history, effectively locking out the very people who need capital to grow. For large institutions and corporations, capital remains abundant and cheap. For households and small businesses, it becomes conditional, expensive, or simply out of reach. Sometimes it's completely inaccessible. The system doesn't remove credit, it reallocates it, concentrating financial power and widening the gap between those who can borrow to build wealth and those who must borrow just to survive. Third, the housing filter. Perhaps the most tangible of the three, housing is one of the clearest barriers to stability and wealth creation. In major economic hubs across the globe, property prices and rents have risen at a pace that completely disconnects from local incomes. This isn't just a supply and demand issue, it's also driven by housing being treated as a financial asset for global investment, rather than as fundamental shelter. As a result, ownership moves from being a goal to a fantasy for millions. Meanwhile, rent consumes a growing and unsustainable share of earnings, leaving little room for savings, investment, or even handling unexpected expenses. Location itself becomes a privilege. And since access to the best jobs, schools, and services follows location, the housing filter effectively becomes a gatekeeper to opportunity itself. Put these three filters together: stagnant real income, restricted access to credit, and unaffordable housing, and the pattern becomes undeniable. You are not failing to reach growth. Growth is being systematically filtered before it ever has a chance to reach you. Now comes the psychological impact. People hear, inflation is under control, but they still pay more. They hear, unemployment is low, but their jobs feel unstable, replaceable, or stagnant. They see record market valuations, but their own savings, if they exist, barely keep up. This creates a disconnect. The data says stability. Reality feels like pressure. And when that gap grows, trust declines, not just in the economy, in institutions, in policy, in the system itself. This is not isolated to a single country. Different regions show different numbers. Some are stronger, some are weaker, but the structure repeats: growth at the top, pressure at the base, limited mobility in between. Young people struggle to access housing. Small businesses struggle to access capital. Middle-income households struggle to advance. The details vary, the pattern does not. So the real question is not, is the economy growing? Because it is. The real question is, who is still allowed to access that growth? Who can convert work into progress? Who can access capital on fair terms? Who can secure stability in housing and cost of living? Because right now, the global economy did not collapse, but access to its gains is being filtered. And until that filter changes, every headline that says the economy is doing well will be met with the same answer. Maybe on paper, but not in reality.